So let's go ahead and talk about Triple Beat. Is it a good Japanese booster box to go ahead and open up, grade, and try to make some money flipping some cards there? Well, let's go ahead and break it down. We're going to be talking about 14 different cards, and I do think this set is pretty fantastic. We've already talked about Scarlet EX and Violet EX when it comes to the Japanese booster boxes, and I would say Triple Beat beats both of them. Now it has a lot of things going for it. The chase card is a fan favorite chase card where a lot of people are going for it, and you can tell just by the sheer amount of population cards that have already been graded. It also carries the three starters for Scarlet and Violet era. It has two regional variant Pokemons, and whenever we're talking about the filler cards, the other EX, art rares, whatever you want to call them, overall, pretty beautiful looking cards, very colorful. However, their price is not that great, but it doesn't matter. So we're going to go ahead and start talking about the cards itself. We got 14 cards. We're going to go ahead and exclude the trainers. And whenever we're talking about these prices, these are the prices that these cards go for, raw, graded on the app Collector. So if you use Collector, you're going to see a lot of this data reflects that, and it's going to be pretty similar. So starting off with the bottom 7, the first card that we'll go ahead and talk about, it's going to be Pyroar. All right. So Pyroar is honestly one of my favorite cards whenever I've gotten it. It's a fantastic, beautiful looking card. Now, the raw card of this value, you should be able to find this card somewhere around $4. If you get it graded, it's going for around $16. So it's honestly cheaper if you buy the card already graded rather than buying it yourself and then sending it to get graded. Honestly, I do feel like this is extremely low. It's very low PSA price, so I'm not very confident about this. It should honestly still be around a $25 card. Population wise, there is a total of 1,076 PSA 10s out there. And overall, whenever we're talking about all the graded copies out there, there's 1,150. That gives you a 93% chance of this card coming back as a 10 if you send it graded. If you send it to go get graded yourself. Now, overall, I'm not starting off to a great start, but Pyroar is a beautiful looking card. Next card that we're going to be talking about, we're going to be talking one of those full arts, if you want to call those, and we're going to be talking about Lycanroc EX. Now, this card, raw wise, is going for around $6.50, so you can find it around $6 to $5. A PSA 10 copy is going for around 16. Now, population wise, this is a very low population. Not a lot of people are sending this card to get graded, and it makes sense because it's already got a lot of exposure in Sun and Moon. But for PSA 10 copies out there, there is 181 copies in a PSA 10. Overall copies that have already been graded, only 191. This gives you a 94% chance of sending this card and coming back as a 10. So extremely low population, but it's a full art. So you can go ahead and take a gamble on this. But overall, I think this is a card that can probably be a little bit like manipulated if we're talking about like grading manipulation. So card number three, let's go with another region. Let's go with the first regional variant, and we're going to be talking about Paldean Tauros. Now, Paldean Tauros is going for around $3.80, so you can probably find this card around $3 raw. A PSA 10 copy is going for around $19, and there's only a total of 1,058 PSA 10s out there. So another card that finally broke over 1,000 mark. Total amount of copies that have already been graded, well, there's around 1,150, so that gives you around a 91% chance of sending this card to get graded and coming back as a 10. Overall, I think it's a fantastic looking card for Tauros. Honestly, it's all black, so I wouldn't be surprised if you really look into this card that there's going to be a shiny Tauros in there just for the kicks of it. Now, going into let's go a regular full art. We got Tropius. So Tropius card, that one's going for around $3.30. PSA 10s, a PSN 10 will cost you around $18. Whenever we're looking around the population, there's only around 855 PSA 10s. Now, when we're talking about total amount of cards that have already been graded, well, there's been around 904, giving you a 94% chance of you sending this card to go ahead and get graded. Overall, I do think this is a great looking card. If I'm not mistaken, this card is by Jerky, and you can tell just because of the color. So in this channel, we like Jerky cards. Fantastic, colorful cards, should be a fan favorite among kids, maybe your significant others, just for the simple fact that it's clean, nothing too complicated. So, and that's already 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, card number 5, Miss Magius. So, this card goes around $6. A PSA 10 copy is going to cost you around $24. So honestly, I think this is a fairly good price, and I think $20 to $25 is the standard price for a Japanese PSA 10. Now, for copies of this card, there's around 1,296 copies. 1,296 copies in a PSA 10. Total amount of cards that have already been sent for grading, we got around 1,402. So this card gives you a 92% chance of sending it and coming back as a 10. Overall, I do think this card is absolutely beautiful with the colors. Now, the colors are fairly light, so I wouldn't be surprised if the population on this is a little bit low, or I'm actually honestly surprised that the gem rate is over 90%. But overall, I think this is a beautiful, fantastic looking card. Probably one of the best Miss Magius cards that have ever come out. Now, the second regional variant, we got Paldean Wooper. Now, this raw card will go for around $4, $4.50. A PSA 10 will cost you around $24. Now, total amount of copies have already been graded. Well, this card has been graded. It has a PSA 10 number of 649. Whenever we're talking about the overall population of being graded, 735 copies out there. Now, this one's going to be one of the lower gem rated cards, and this card will go for around 88% chance of coming back as a 10. So overall, honestly, a little bit surprised, but I do think the Paldean Wooper with the brown background in the mud might be like a big cause of why this card is coming back as a 9, or has an 88% chance of coming back as a 10, and that's pretty low for Japanese standards. But overall, I think it's a pretty good looking card. It's one of those, I would say, cute cards, but honestly, not too bad. So outside from those, which are like the miscellaneous Pokemon, we're going to go ahead and start talking about the starters. Whenever we're talking about the starters, we're going to be talking about the first evolution, or the starters, and its final evolution, because no one really cares about the middle evolutions, and I understand that. So we're going to be talking about the first stage and the last stage, right? So starting off in the bottom of the list, and you guys will see it, that this Pokemon will not get any love, or just it did not hit with the current generation. We got Quaxley. He's going to be starting off the list. Now, Quaxley, the raw card of this card will go for around $3.90. So you can probably get this card for around $3. If you're paying anything over $4, you're paying a premium. Now, a PSA 10 copy of this card will go and cost you around $17, which is fairly low. Not even meaning the $25 that I would say is like base price for a PSA 10. Whenever we're looking at the population though, so for the population of this card for PSA 10s, there's around 1,878 copies out there. Total amount of cards that have already been graded, there's around 2,034 copies. So this card does have a 92% chance of coming back as a 10, but unfortunately, Quaxley is probably going to go down as Scarlet and Violet's least favorite starter, which is a shame. But overall, I kind of understand it, because I do think that Fuecoco and Sprigatito kind of nailed it. Now, whenever we're talking about Sprigatito and Fuecoco, the next card would be Sprigatito. The raw value of this card goes for around $5.70. So you can pretty much get this card for around $5. A PSA 10 version of this card is going to cost you around $40. So overall, it's not bad. And we're talking about the population of PSA 10s out there. Well, there's around 2,964 total amount of cards that have already been graded, 3,114. So this card is doing pretty fantastic, and the fact that you have a 95% chance of coming back as a 10. So honestly, I do feel like there's a little bit more money to be made in grading Sprigatito cards over Quaxley. But honestly, it makes sense. It's a lot of people's favorite starter Pokemon and Scarlet and Violet, and it did fairly well in the competitive scene. Oh, it's been doing fairly well. Nothing too crazy, but it's not a bad starter. Now, for the last starter, whenever we're talking about the first stage evolution, this is going to be the most popular one. We got Frey Coco. Now, Frey Coco's raw card is going for around $7. No, so $7.79 over 8, you're paying a premium. 7 and below 7, you're finding a pretty good deal. And this card is going for around $40 in a PSA 10. Now, when we're talking about copies that have already been graded, in a PSA 10, we got around 2,054, and total amount of copies already being graded is 2,212. So Frey Coco has a 92% chance of coming back as a 10. So let's talk about Sprigatito and Frey Coco. So Sprigatito has a total of 3,114 cards that have already been graded. Frey Coco is 900 cards or 900 copies below with 2,212. So a lot more people are grading Sprigatito, and it's going around for $40 in a PSA 10, while Frey Coco has a premium charge a little bit, $2 more, because the raw value is $7 and the raw value of Sprigatito is $5, and it's going for around $40 as well. So honestly, if you're looking to grade a card that might do a little bit better again, flipping over, you'll probably be leaning more to Sprigatito, but Frey Coco has a higher raw value, so you would think that the PSA 10 should be a little bit higher. Maybe in the future this will correct itself, but Frey Coco has a higher raw card value than Sprigatito, but they're both going for around $40, and Sprigatito has a 95% chance. It has higher gem rate than Frey Coco, which is a little bit interesting. Now, before we go ahead and talk about the final stage evolutions, we're going to talk about one of the full art cards that is actually beating the Quaxley line, and this is why I think it's hilarious. So we got Denene EX. Denene EX, the raw value of this card is going around $8.13. So anything over $8.50 is going to be considered a premium. So if you can find this card for around $7, maybe $6.50, honestly, that's what I will be trying to pay for. It will be a pretty good deal. A PSA 10 version of this card is going for around $35. Now, total amount of copies of this card, we got around 2,151. So those are 2,151 PSA 10 copies out there. And for total amount of copies already been graded, 2,444. This is going to be one of the lower gem rate cards coming in at 88%. But tell me, how does this full art of Denene outbeat Frey Coco, Sprigatito, and Quaxley when we're talking about the raw card? But the PSA 10 value only outshines Quaxley. It's a little weird. Honestly, I wouldn't be paying such a high premium for a full art card. I'll probably pay that more for Quaxley, Frey Coco, or Sprigatito, but not for Denene EX. Regardless, let's go ahead and talk about the final evolutions before we get to our number one. Now, the first one is not going to be any surprise. We got Quackwaval, Jesus Christ, Quackwaval. Quackwaval. I don't know why I'm struggling. I'm going to start saying his name. Now, the raw value of this card for the final evolution will cost you around $12.15. A PSA 10 copy will finally, there's around a $40 cost for a PSA 10. Now, whenever we're looking at the graded PSA 10s out there, there's 1,723 copies. If we're looking at the total amount of copies already being graded, we got 1,881. So you have a 91% chance of sending this card to get graded and coming back as a 10. Now, $12 for a raw card and only getting a $40 PSA 10. I don't think it's a good value. Hey, but that's just me. But I guess people really won't pay that premium for the final stage evolution of your least favorite Pokemon and Scarlet and Violet, starter wise. Now, this is the next one, Skeledirge. Skeledirge raw card is going for around $29.58. And now the PSA 10 copy will cost you around $65. When we're looking at the total amount of PSA 10 copies out there, there's around 2,327 copies already out there. And total amount of cards that have already been graded, there's around 2,501 copies. So that's going to give you a 93% chance of sending this card and coming back as a 10. Now, $30 for a raw card, you send it to get graded, it should typically double in price. So, especially for a final stage evolution. So, if you're paying $30 for a raw card, you should be seeing a PSA 10 around $65. So, honestly, I think this is a pretty good, accurate cost whenever we're talking about buying and sending it to get graded. Overall, I think this card is great. It's not going to be the best Skeledirge card out there, but it's a really good one. Now, when we're talking about Meowscarada, I'm not going to really put too much effort for it. I'm just going to be using the information of collector, but this is where it really doesn't make sense. So a Meowscarada raw card will run you around $51.23, pretty high for a Japanese raw card, while the PSA 10 version will run you around $52. So you can see how is a raw card only going to be worth $1 less than a PSA 10. Honestly, I think there's some sort of error there, but the Meowscarada card should be going somewhere more around $25 if the PSA 10 card is going to go around $52. Now, total amount of copies of this card have already been graded. You're gonna find there's for PSA 10s. I apologize, for PSA 10s. There's around 3,859 copies already out there. Total amount of cards that have already been graded, 4,179. That gives you around a 92% chance of sending this card to be graded and coming back as a 10. So honestly, the numbers don't make sense there. I think there's some sort of error if they're using information from eBay. Honestly, I think maybe this is where someone's been trying to pump the Meowscarada card a little bit more, whether if it's in the raw side or in the PSA 10 side. But this card comes in number 2. Honestly, I still do think that Skeledirge is going to be the better card than Meowscarada, but Meowscarada is not a bad line itself or a bad card. Now, for the last and final card in this set, and honestly, it's not going to be a surprise, but for the sheer amount of copies of PSA 10s and copies that have already been graded, this is insane. You can get all the cards that we just talked about, combine them, and they wouldn't reach this mofo. And we're going to be talking about Magikarp. And of course, it's Magikarp. Now, I can honestly say this is probably one of the best cards in Scarlet and Violet. And outside from Temporal Festival or the Eevee set, right? Or the Team Rocket set, Journey Together, I honestly do believe that Magikarp is going to be the Scarlet and Violet card, right? We're not talking about the highest price, but whenever you're going to think about the Scarlet and Violet era, that's going to be Magikarp, and you can kind of tell because of the population kind of backs it up. Now, the raw value of this card, whenever you want to buy it, this card will go for around $64.22. So getting this card for around $60 in the Japanese is not a bad deal. Now, a PSA 10 will go for around $113. So you can see you're kind of just doubling that. Now, PSA 10 copies there is around 37,792 PSA 10s out there. People love this card. And it makes sense because the English PSA 10s, they're so rare, like they're rare because it's so hard to get graded that people will pay less to get this card. And there's 37,000 PSA 10s, right? When we're talking about the overall amount of cards that have already been graded for this card, there's around 40,875. So this card has a 92% chance of you ripping it from the pack, sending it to get graded, coming back as a 10, and then selling it for $113. This is where the most money on this set is, on Magikarp itself. Now, I understand it's a beautiful card. I want to get this card. I want to get this card for the cheap toes. So if I can find a PSA 9, PSA 8, I don't care. It's going up there. But 92% chance, and this card has 37,000 copies. I mean, we've only talked about 3 sets, kind of breaking it down like this, but this is insane. It really is. Nonetheless, Magikarp, is it deserving? Honestly, I do think so. A lot of people love this card. A lot of people go after this card. And if you can pay $100 to get a copy of this card, it makes sense. So there you go. We went ahead and talked about Triple Beat, about the Pokemon. We're not talking about the trainers because the English people or the English market don't care about trainers. And if you're trying to buy these sets, grade them, and sell them here somewhere in an English dominant market, most of your money is going to be coming from Magikarp. Now, the starters do fairly well, and honestly, I do believe that the filler Pokemons like Paldia and Wooper, Tropius, Pyroar, Paldia and Tauros, Mismagius are some of the better looking cards, but the numbers don't reflect that whenever we're talking about the art. So, if we're talking about a tier list of the 3 sets that I've already talked about, we got Triple Beat, we got Violet EX, and Scarlet EX. Violet EX would be the bottom set, followed by Scarlet EX, and then Triple Beat. But that's honestly my opinion. So should you buy this booster box that goes for around $86 and then rip them? Hopefully you get a Magikarp, send it to get graded. Just for the Magikarp, I would say yes. For collector, I would say yes. You know, but that's just me. Oh, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys made it this far, hell yeah. You guys are real troopers. Outside from that, I hope you guys have a fantastic day, and we'll see you next time, eventually. Peace.